Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to our Ag Progress Day session on transitioning ag business, positioning for the future. I'm Rick Roush. I'm the Dean of the College of Agricultural Sciences at Penn State, and I'm serving as your moderator for this session and really delighted to welcome you. Before we begin, we are offering this program both in person and via Zoom. Please note that we are recording the session and we'll be sharing the link with all who are interested. Please feel free to share that with anyone whom you think might be interested in this program. In the 2021 update of the Economic Impact of Agriculture in Pennsylvania publication produced by eConsult Solutions Incorporated and commissioned by Team PA, it was noted that Pennsylvania is facing a significant loss of small farms due to various issues that include a lack of succession planning. Also listed as one of the biggest threats or challenges the ag industry is facing in Pennsylvania is land availability. This session emerged from a recent conversation I had with Secretary Redding and with Dan Eichenlau, who's a serial entrepreneur in the landscaping and composting industries, regarding the importance of this issue to the future of Pennsylvania agriculture and the need to ensure that ag-related businesses that are interested in transitioning to the next generation, to employees, or to a new business model are aware of the resources that are available to them to ensure a successful transition. We have an impressive group of speakers with us today, as you'll see, that will speak on to various issues and scenarios to consider when considering a transition. Our first speaker today is Senator Elder Vogel, who's chair of the Senate Ag and Rural Affairs Committee and outspoken on this topic. Senator Vogel will frame the discussion today. Senator Vogel, welcome.
Thank you, Dean, and good afternoon, everyone. It's always a pleasure to be here at Ag Progress Days and get to talk about farming, my favorite subject. Also, before we start, I want to thank the 4-H leadership team for being here today. Nice to see you all. I was a 4-H member for 10 years myself, way back in the day. So appreciate you being here today and joining us at the session as well. So as the Dean said, today we're going to sort of kind of try and frame transition farming and how it goes about. And there's many different ways to do it. And we're going to have other discussions. Other people up here are going to give you their opinions as well. But I think communication is the big thing and the place you need to start. If you're going to transition your farm, you need to be able to communicate with your family members and whoever else you might be going to transition your farm to. I mean, whether it's family members or whether it's a non-family member who's taking over the property or your farm for you. Obviously, we're going to transition a lot of farm acres across the country in the next 10 years. Farmers are getting older, and there's numbers of, like 20 or 30 million acres of property are going to change hands in the next 5 to 10 years across the United States. So obviously this is a huge issue, not only here in Pennsylvania, but across the whole country and in the Midwest, especially, where so much farmland and all of our main crops are grown. Corn, soybeans, and wheat are grown for maintain our crops and stuff here in the United States. So that, but also talking about workforce development, we've had different discussions. We've done some legislation with the Secretary of Reading here and things for workforce development funds for that. I have a beginning farmer tax credit piece of legislation that we passed to give beginning farmers the opportunity to get farmers be able to get a tax credit for a beginning farmer to join their operation, to help give them a break, to give them a transition period there as well, to join into a farming operation and give the owner either a lease break on their taxes for a couple of years for leasing the property, or if you're flat out sell it a tax credit as well for selling your property to them, just to help them out a little bit, give them a little bit more incentive, I guess, rather than sell it to a housing developer, which is the easy way to go, I guess. So, but obviously, and farming is a cyclical business, obviously up and down. Corn prices are up and soybean prices are up this year, and milk prices are up a little bit, but the last couple of years, they've all been down. So being able to live through the ups and downs of farming gives you a lot of gray hair. I've been through many ups and downs myself, and most people in this room have, I'm sure, as well. So I think with that, I'm gonna stop and let the other members say what they're going to say. Then we'll get back into some questions and answers or something later on. So thank you, Dean.
Thank you very much, Senator Vogel. Our next speaker is likewise a familiar personality for all of you, the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture Secretary Russell Redding. He will discuss the role and resources that are available through the Department of Agriculture. Secretary Redding, welcome.
Dean, it's good to see you. It is always good to be with you, Senator Vogel and the panel. Thank you all. And to those who are present, thank you. I'm actually impressed with the number of people who are willing to get in a seat and talk about transitions, right? Because it's usually the conversation we try to avoid. I think for each of us who have been through these transitions, they're never easy, right? They take longer than we would ever desire in planning, but it's also the most important and critical conversation we're going to have. We can spend all day talking about how important agriculture is. We can talk about its future. We can pick our sort of point of progress on this grounds during this week. But at the end of the day, it's about somebody wanting to step into this business, right? Who is inspired to be in the business and sees their life's journey in this business. But that is all built on an assumption that land is available, that the generation that owns that land is interested in having the conversation, right? But also then how do you, methodically work your way through the process of transitioning. And what was interesting, this is probably true for most of us, that we think of transitions by our own sort of business context. Right. And what came out in the conversation with the dean and I and Dan Eichenlaub was that there's a whole nother world, right, called the business, the non-farm business, ag business transition, right? That just isn't necessarily where we as a department necessarily have been because of our focus on farmland preservation and transition and the farm community. But we realize there's a whole support structure inside of agriculture that also has to transition, right? So, and I see some of you here today, so thank you. Just out of curiosity, a show of hands of those whose farm or business is in transition. Just put it, okay? I know that there's actually more than that, because everybody here, right, is here for a reason to talk about transitions. But the point is that it's a diverse, very diverse group. We have, as Senator Vogel noted, we've done a lot of great work in the last couple of years on transitioning support and resources through the Pennsylvania Farm Bill and companion pieces to that Farm Bill, like the innovative new and beginning farmer tax credit that Senator Vogel is a champion of. But I feel like we're finally at the moment, right, where we can both have an intelligent conversation about the need to transition, but then also engage in the conversation about how to, right? And there's a big difference. We can all talk about need, but then how do you do that? And there are more resources today. There are more mechanisms to help and assist than there's ever been, right, in Pennsylvania. And I think that's a really important statement, that it is as important today to talk about transition as it was 25 years ago to stand up the State Farm and Preservation Program. And the intentionality that we attach to planning has to be equal to the intentionality of preservation. And that's an important transition moment, but I think also an important time where the resources of the Pennsylvania Farm Bill are critical to that. We can talk about them in more depth, but we've got the Ag Business Development Center, we've got the Farm Vitality grants that are available, the New Beginning Farmer Tax Credit. We've got resources through Penn State, you'll hear in a moment. We've got the Small Business Development Centers. So takeaway message is it is not for lack of interest in support, right? The issue is interest in having that conversation. So look forward to the conversation today, and a note of thanks again to the Dean and each of you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger Secretary Redding. Our next speaker, Ann Miller, is an educator with the Penn State Extension Energy, Business, and Community Vitality Unit based in the Harrisburg area. She recently joined Extension from the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau and has spent the last year working with farmers on their financials via the Farm Sense course, but also the Penn State Butcher School students and the Food for Profit team. And we'll discuss the resources that are available through Penn State Extension. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? So Extension has been acutely aware of the need to address farm transitions because we're on the ground working with farmers daily. It usually starts with a phone call or an email, and mostly from women. Where do I start? And sometimes the issues are easy. They want to turn the farm over to a family member or a longtime employee. But sometimes the problems are much more complex and heartbreaking and involve family strife or a stressful financial situation. So to that end, we've been developing resources. We have 2 courses and a host of articles. So if you like to learn by courses, we have our business transition for family farm and business succession planning. Say that 5 times fast, but we also have a business exit strategy course. We have a library of articles, including contingency planning for dairy farmers and estate planning for PA farms. Next week, we have 2 webinars. One is on early succession planning, and the next is a series that we're really excited about, and I want you to remember this name: Farmers Can Retire Too. So we developed that with the PA Department of Banking and Securities, and it's going to include how to develop a spending plan, savings, future medical costs, Social Security, and estate planning. But we'll even go so far as to include transition planning in modules when we're doing our new and beginning farmer classes, because we really think it's never too early to start. We have 2 staff members that are going to start this fall with the PA Ag Professional Network course. Lynn Kime and Christy Powell. They'll start training the American Farmland Trust, Transitioning Land to a New Generation curriculum. And we have developed a really solid relationship with PA Farm Link. They maintain a network of certified farm transition coordinators who work with farmers across the state to create succession plans. In May, they're going to do a training at State College, and anyone is welcome to attend that training to become I think it's called a, let's see, certified farm transition coordinator. So things are in the works. You know, we've been doing a lot of webinars, but we do hope to get back out in person training soon and be speaking at a lot of conferences on transition planning as well. And recently we met with the PA Agricultural Mediation Program that's hosted at the Center for Ag and Shale Law, and they will also accept referrals for families that are in contentious situations. So there are lots of resources available. We need to get the word out. We need everyone here as an acolyte can hopefully help us refer people so that we can get them the help they need. That's it.
Thank you very much, Ann. I'm sure we'll have more questions about that later. So we're also pleased to have with us Daryl Curtis, who has served as the president and CEO of Ag Choice Farm Credit since January 1st, 2013. He has 33 years of experience in the farm credit system, starting with the Farm Credit Bank of Baltimore. Now, we thought it was essential in this program to engage the private financial sector, and when we came to that conclusion, Daryl came immediately to mind. Daryl will discuss some of the financial considerations with transitioning an ag business. Daryl.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to do a very thorough overview in 5 minutes of all the financial considerations, but I do have a PowerPoint over there for you. It's obviously a challenging thing for all parties concerned. You start out with the family issues, and you got tax and financial, you got fairness issues, legal. It's a lot to take on for anybody. But just to highlight a few things I have on the screen up there, just some of the issues we see very often when we're working with transition plans. You know, you have family operations, small businesses. They've dumped almost all their assets back into the business. And that means generally you're looking at really low levels of liquidity. So all the assets are hard assets and not a lot of liquidity. And that's tough for the ownership going out. Often very little retirement has built up. Low income taxes, farmers have been trying to manage taxes. So there may not be a lot of Social Security income to come, and they haven't necessarily invested in retirement for themselves. A lot of the farms, most of them probably are not debt free, and that debt must be serviced in transition. So that's a major issue as well. You have multiple family owners. And so very frequently we see the farm not being going to direct descendants, but maybe nieces or nephews, somebody like that. And so the owner is trying to balance fairness with their own children, perhaps, as well as the transition to that other generation that's going to take over. They want to make sure they're being fair in all cases. They also want to minimize taxes on the income level as well as inheritance. That provides its own challenges. And then there's no long-term health care insurance, which is a big deal, obviously, for the outgoing farmer. On the next slide, I just highlighted a few other things that we see as very common issues we run across in a lot of transitions. The debt loads can be high. That's a challenge for the farmer who's selling out. And importantly, the next generation hasn't been trained how to manage the operation, or maybe hasn't been trained much or seen much on the financial side. So they might know maybe how to operate from a business or from production standpoint, perhaps not from the business standpoint. It seems to be a major issue in a lot of cases that we see. And you need to pay the retiring and exiting members and replace them. So there's a strain on cash flow because that may well be part of the labor equation. I mentioned volatile commodity prices. That's having an impact on transmissions. And obviously, some of the proposed tax changes, there's certainly an appetite for more tax revenue in Washington. And some of the things being proposed would make it more difficult, we think, for this transition to be successfully carried out. There's a gifting issue. The senior generation, they need to retire. They need money for that. Cash flows don't always allow for a good market price transition. So the new generation coming in, sometimes the sale isn't at a full market value, and that puts some strain on the generation going out. And importantly, this is something we see often, but we need to address the financial viability of the outgoing and the incoming operators. And so both of them are in the equation. And so when you're going out looking at consulting services, a lot of times we're focusing maybe on the legal structure of the business or something like that. But man, the fundamentals are you've got two generations perhaps, and you've got to make sure both have the financial ability to go through the process. And the biggest one here, I think Senator Vogel talked about communication, and this is so essential. A lot of times we just see folks waiting too long. These are tough discussions within a family at times, and they wait too long to start. And that makes it more difficult, maybe more costly. So there are available consultants and attorneys out there. Ag Choice Farm Credit does do transition planning, consulting work. And I know there are other good entities as well. Pennsylvania Farm Bureau, I would mention. Acuity Advisors down in Lancaster has a pretty robust arm doing this. And there are others. I think you heard a little bit from Annie about what the extension can do in terms of training. So there are resources out there, but even with all that said, it's a difficult process.
Thank you very much, Daryl. So next we have Dan Eichenlab. Dan is a Penn State graduate in landscape architecture and a serial entrepreneur, having co-founded several businesses in the landscaping and composting business. His primary business is as president and co-founder of Eichenlab Inc., a full-service design, build, landscape, construction, and maintenance firm that has provided award-winning service to residences and business in Western Pennsylvania for almost 50 years. Dan is going to discuss his company's transition plans and the critical nature of this issue to his industry. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Dean. It's great to see so many young people here today. And you're probably saying, what the heck am I doing here? I'm not retiring anytime soon, but you're part of the solution. So make sure you take away some notes here because we're going to talk about them. As the Dean said, I do run a significant landscape contracting company in the Pittsburgh area. We're continuing to grow about 10% a year since the Great Recession. And we currently have about 85 team members delivering our services, just to give you kind of an idea of the scale of our business. What interested me most about this discussion today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the transition of this landscape business, which is a little different than a farm. But my concern with the farming side is I buy from nurseries, and I know when a nursery is going to be closing because they don't start planting crops for future years, because a nursery often can turn a crop around at the very soonest in about 3 years and more like 5 to 7 years. So as soon as I see a nursery not planting plants anymore, I know I'm going to see them going out of business. And that's a real challenge. We hear about supply chain, but can you imagine if my company can't get plant material to put into the ground? Now I don't have a business anymore either. So I'm very concerned about those farms, those nurseries, to make sure that we have a transition plan to keep them in business. I want to talk a little bit about the challenges and lessons learned, then I'll talk about my own transition. But this is probably the most important strategic plan a business will ever do, is this final plan that says how we transition the company. And most people don't deal with it because it means dealing with your own mortality. We all have to realize we're going to die someday, and how are we going to do that? And so to young people it might be helping to start a difficult conversation that your elders don't want to have, because Daryl just summed it all up. He gave all those reasons why this is tough and we shouldn't do it, but we must do it. And it's the same reason people don't create wills. The lesson that I learned is, unfortunately, my regular accountants and lawyers were not the ideal people to figure out what my transition was going to look like. They do really great at the day-to-day business stuff that I do, but there are people that specialize in this area, and you need to find them. If you don't, what happens is I find those groups give you the flavor of the day. In other words, whatever the last deal was they did, they assumed that was good for you, and that's not necessarily the case. So, and again, those lawyers and accountants will be important because they'll help with valuation. They'll help with tax implications, evaluating them. They'll help with putting together the agreements that might take to transition your business, but they're not the ones that come up with the solution. So I was fortunate enough that I actually found a succession coach, somebody whose whole job it is all they do is go from one business to the next and help them figure out what they need to do. When the person showed up at my door, they said, I have 100 tools in my toolbox. We got to figure out which 10 you want to use. So that told me that this person was going to help me figure out what was best for me, not the last deal that they did. And so the whole idea was to help determine the goals of our succession. One of the things important to us was a legacy. We wanted to sell an ongoing concern. The sum of the parts isn't worth as much, or the sum of the individual pieces isn't worth as much as the ongoing concern. All those financial items that Daryl mentioned are really important. You got to look at all of those, from what's the value of the business to what's the tax implications of whatever way you decide you're going to take this thing and go. And then you have to have a financial plan in place to say, how is this transition going to happen? You heard Daryl talk a lot about sometimes cash flow doesn't allow it to happen. In my case, there is good cash flow. So that played into the plan that we decided to implement. Another thing that people mentioned here, it takes months to create a plan and it takes years to implement it. So more than 10 years ago, since I transitioned to employees, and I'll talk about that in a minute, I had to begin to think about who are those people that I see could be the right ingredients to be the executive team and carry our company forward. So again, years to implement. This isn't something that you're going to snap your finger, or somebody, the senior person on the farm gets sick and you think you're going to solve this in a couple months. You might be able to do strategically a few things to help, but you're not going to solve the problem. You need to really get on it a decade or more before you even think retirement is coming. The other thing that I learned is don't put all your eggs in one basket. What's plan B? So in my case, I've got 3 executives that are taking over the business. In case one of them dies, there are 2 more left. So I didn't want to have just one person identified that was going to have ownership. And then if something happens to them, it would mess up my plan. So again, think about a plan B as you go forward. And don't be afraid to do something today, knowing that you can update that plan later. So again, there's a lot you're going to put in writing, but there is the opportunity to make adjustments to it as you go forward. So my particular transition plan and decision to do what I did was I have 3 executive team members that have been with my company anywhere from 24 to 16 years. They're all landscape contracting grads from Penn State, very bright people who continue to learn from the day they came into my operation till today. They're leaders, they're learners, and that's why they got chosen. I want to be clear that Eichenlob is not transitioning as an ESOP, which is an employee where all the employees own a piece. This is an executive team that's going to own the company in my passing. In fact, they're owning ownership interest right now, but I will continue to own control of the board until my death. So they don't have they can't take it off on some wild path without my recognition, but I do intend that they're going to run it day to day. And we heard a lot about the training. So these people have been looking at the financial statements. They know all the metrics of the business. They can run. If I get hit by a bus tomorrow, they can make it run. I'm very confident of that. And so that's why I was confident going down this path. My stock upon my death will be bought by the company, not by them. And then the company will give my estate a note that's good for 5 years. And then we have the financial plan that says, how will that note get paid off? There's not enough free cash flow to pay it off in 5 years, but there's enough to pay it off that then some financial institution will lend them the remaining money at the end of 5 years to pay off the final debt. And then of course, they'll have that debt done with the bank. And the other reason we chose this method beyond tax advantages is this is essentially an annuity. So the profit that my company spins off every year, my share of ownership, that profit flows right through to me. So essentially I have an annuity, or that's my retirement plan, that I'm going to get X dollars a year from that scenario. So that's a little bit of the story of Eichenlob Inc. and what we're doing as a landscape contracting business. And know that is a little bit different than a farm where you have a very big chunk in investment in land, which is another whole item. But it was important for us to have the right coach to help us go down that path. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dan. So, and can I ask you, you were faced with a situation common to many farms, as your children didn't want to go into this business, right?
Right, I have two children. I am in this business because I have a passion for what I do. I love what I do. I wanted my children to have the same passion in life. I didn't want them to think they needed to do what dad did. So my children are off doing their own thing that they love to do, and I'm happy for that. And they'll benefit from my estate someday, but they're not running the business because that isn't what they wanted to do.
Exactly. So it's not an uncommon problem for people with farms. So thank you again, Dan. Next is Jim Hepler. Jim has been a full-time farmer since 1971, is a former partner of Hepler Homestead Farms, a 125 cow, 600-acre farm in Pittman, Schuylkill County. He's been blessed to use his abilities to steward a 7th generation farm and successfully pass it to the next generation. Welcome, Jim.
Well, thank you, Dean. I want to stress, I think, today that transitioning, in my case, wasn't a one-time event. It happened 4 times in my career. 1975, I formed a partnership with my dad. 1990, 15 years later, my wife and I became the sole proprietors. In 2006, 16 years again, we formed a partnership with our 2 sons. In 2020, last year, we transitioned the business over to our 2 sons. So talking about transitioning, we talked and looked for 2 years and nothing happened. We listened, yeah, we need to do this. Maybe this winter when it's cold out, you know, how many times do we farmers say that? Maybe this winter, yeah. No, that didn't work. Why is transitioning so difficult? And I think, as Dan said, it involves a difficult topic, doesn't it? And that topic is our ultimate demise on this earth, isn't it? That's why we find it difficult. Yeah, Dan's shaking his head. So we enjoy planning for fun events, don't we? Weddings and vacations and parties. But we really don't enjoy planning for things surrounding death. And since we don't like unpleasant chores, don't we always procrastinate on them? So we found we needed someone to give us a push. We were stuck in the mud, really. We didn't know where to go. Nothing was happening. We had to have those conversations beginning. So we hired a wealth advisor. We think it was a great move. He helped us define our goals, and he was able to vision with us. He saw what we wanted and helped us to get there. You need to know your goals in this. You've got to have them written down. You need to get them down and know what they are so that you can relate them to the people working with you on your team. And by the way, you're going to need a team. You're not just going to need one person to help you through this. This was our experience. Of course, we had our tax accountant, we had our wealth advisor, and of course, an attorney. And they needed to communicate with each other. They needed to call each other and say, hey, we're looking at this project at the Heplers here. What do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? They needed to get involved heavily in this, and their expertise was way ahead of ours. They knew the options to do and to take. I also want to personally thank the Pennsylvania Department of Ag, Senator Vogel and Secretary Redding for the Farm Vitality Program. It was a great help to us, and it helped us incur a lot of our expenses, which will come. You will incur expenses, and we all know attorneys don't work for the rates farmers do and so forth, and the clock ticks. And there is a lot of financial money involved here. The Farm Vitality Program was great. It paid about half of our expenses. And I thank you personally for implementing that program. It came just at the right time and was a great help to us. It's important to have conversations between both generations, as I think Darrell mentioned. very critical. You need to talk. Everybody has to be at the table or it is going to be a disaster. Believe me, it will be. There can't be surprises. All parties need to be satisfied. Lastly, I think there's a spiritual dimension here as well. We're all pilgrims on this earth, and we all came with nothing, and we're all gonna go with nothing. Everything belongs to the Lord, and we are his caretakers. And this is important that we do this. This is our legacy, as Dan said, and it's important that we do a good job of not only caring for this land and these things we have, but of transitioning them to the next generation. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jim. So our final speaker today is Kent Strock. Kent is a graduate of Penn State in Ag Education and a graduate of Iowa State University with a master's degree in animal science. He returned to the family farm in 1981, purchased a portion of the family farm in 2010, and restructured the business. He currently serves as president of Strock Enterprises, Inc., a catering and venue company. Welcome, Kent, and he's joining us today via Zoom. Thank you, Kent.
Thank you. I have to apologize for not being there. I wrenched my back late Monday morning when I was putting equipment away from this past weekend and didn't feel as if I should be traveling 2 hours with a bad back and on pain medication. So I have to apologize to everyone for that. The little bit of a life history there that was given gives you a snapshot of my life, and the fact that we had to the decision to transition was not an easy one. For years, I thought that I would make my living in the swine industry and the poultry industry. Our farm, I am a 5th generation farmer on this particular farm. We've raised turkeys for years. We had our own processing business. We sold direct to the consumer for about 75 years. We raised hogs here from the early 60s until about 2019, when I transitioned out of that also. But about 1981, when I moved back into the area from out in Minnesota, we decided that we'd like to try roasting a pig and hiring ourselves out to do that on weekends. And that really was the beginning of a venture that we are still continuing, a venture that has transitioned in many ways. So 1981, we started roasting pigs to be able to sell a portion of our production. I think that first year I roasted 15 pigs for various backyard parties. By 1994, our catering business had continued to grow. We're still raising pigs and turkeys, of course. And we decided that we needed to add side dishes to our catering options. Now, between about 1981 to 1994, the catering business had grown, and we probably had 5 or 6 roasters that I had built now to roast pigs, and we hired some part-time people. I trained some people to go out and roast pigs for me, continuing to still raise turkeys and hogs. It became apparent over the years that the catering business, every time we booked a catering job, there was a profit. Every pig that went out the door was not necessarily profitable. Every turkey that went out the door was profitable. Why? Because we were closer to the consumer. The retail turkey business gave us the opportunity to capture the consumer's dollar directly. Whereas when you are raising pigs, that's not necessarily the case. Unless you have your own slaughterhouse, you're not capturing the consumer dollar directly. So we tried to move in that direction. In 2010, my father gave me the opportunity to purchase 20 acres of the 87-acre home farm. We took that opportunity, and continued to raise hogs and raise turkeys. The catering business continued to grow in the background to the point that it actually became the main source of our income. It became apparent that things should probably change in the not too distant future. In 2013, no, I think about 2011, my brother-in-law came to me and said, I'm not going to need the bank barn to store hay any longer. He had rented the balance of the farm from my mother. And so that gave us an opportunity now to use a building in a very different manner. So we did some research. And I discovered that the barn weddings looked like something that maybe we should get into. Research was fairly important at this point. I gathered some research from several different sources, talked with people who had done what we were considering. And the statements that I received were, the demand is there and you must do this. So in 2013, we finished a renovation on an old bank barn. And that really began the major transition of the farm. 2013, we got our occupancy permit in June of that year. And we did about 8 or 9 wedding receptions in that barn from June till the end of the year. In 2019, we hosted 79 weddings in that barn and an additional 70 or so functions in other facilities that we had renovated on the farm. Now, what factors came into our decision to make the transition from really full-time farmers to caterers and event hosting? First thing we looked at was our location. We're very close to Route 81, 83, the Turnpike, and Route 15. Location is very important. Number 2, we saw consistent growth in our catering business. From 1994 until 2019, whatever the pandemic slowed us down some, we saw consistent double-digit growth every year. In 2007, we started to see a real uptick in the demand for catering of weddings off-site at off-site locations, such as bed and breakfasts or backyard weddings or weddings at country clubs, many private acreages. The next thing we looked at was our finances. Through the 90s and early 2000s, raising pigs and turkeys was not necessarily the most profitable business. From a cash flow standpoint, we were doing all right, but I wouldn't say we were doing well. So we needed to look at the profit potential versus the farm history. So we did some partial budgeting. I worked with Ag Choice on our transition team. We went through Ag Choice on our financing and decided that we need to change the structure of the business. So we went from a sole proprietorship to a subchapter S corporation. My wife and I were the main stockholders. We each held 50 shares, 100 shares total. Several years later, we decided that we needed to change the structure again. I think this was 2018. And we went to 1,000 shares. And at that point, that gives us a little more flexibility. We also had an evaluation of the business done by a private third entity party. And so we were able to come up with an actual cash value of each share of stock so that if anyone wanted to buy into Strock Enterprises Incorporated, they knew exactly what they would have to pay per share of stock. We had a son who was very interested in the business. We brought him on full time in 2015, and he's now our office manager. We have continued to grow. 2020 was a rough year with the pandemic, but we see 2021 as a banner year. We are on par to surpass 2019. The other things that we did in making the transition was we evaluated our human resources. We looked at our current labor force, which in essence was myself, my wife, and a series of hired part-time people, and decided that if we were going to really make this work, that we needed to add full-time people and additional part-time. We currently have actually only 3 of us full-time, myself, my wife, and our youngest son, Curtis. But we now have 5 people in the office, and at least 2 of them are there every day of the week. In some cases, 3 or 4. We've hired a 3/4 time kitchen manager who has been an excellent resource. We currently employ about 40 part-time workers to help us in our serving. And the other thing that we've done in 2016, when we transitioned out of the turkey business, we had a lady on staff who had done some floral work. And I said to Sharon, Sharon, how about if I take my old turkey processing building and why don't we raise a few flowers here and offer floral packages for our brides? And she said, I'm on board. So the turkey processing building has now become a flower shop. So in the process from 2013 till current times, we have converted a bank barn, a corn crib, a turkey processing facility, an old chicken coop into changing rooms, and we're currently in the process of converting the turkey pen into another facility for larger outdoor events. So the transition, while it has been changed quite a bit over the years, it will continue to change. I think, what's the old saying? The only constant is change. And if you don't change, you'll tend to go backwards. So change is definitely something that we have tried to do to move forward. The other thing that we did in evaluating what we should do was we did take a look at our physical resources. And as I've said, we've now transformed 5 facilities on the property into different uses. Now, those of you who are familiar with zoning ordinances know that you have to go through the township to do almost anything. And of course, we adhere to all township regulations. Consequently, we had to go through several zoning hearing boards to make the transitions. And when you're considering changing your business model, consider everything: your location, your physical resources, your human resources, your finances. Do all the research you possibly can to try and make sure, or at least minimize the chance that you will fail. Now, we could have failed. Fortunately, we did not. And I hope that any of you who are considering business model changes, that you do your homework, and I hope that you are successful. And I have to agree with the last speaker. I think there's a spiritual element in everything. Each one of us knows that we're going to leave this earth at some time, and we'd like to leave a legacy. And I think in our case, we hope that what we've done here is our legacy. Thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, be glad to answer them.
Thank you very much, Kent. So now I'm going to open up, thanks to all of our speakers. So I'm going to open up things for your questions and answers session. Thank you to the audience for all the questions submitted in advance. We'll try to get to those first. If time permits, we'll also take questions from the audience through the Q&A link in Zoom or the microphone for those who have it today. So Mary, you have a list of questions. You want to read them out?
We have one online that says, is there concern regarding the transition of farms to possible foreign non-US interests?
Yes.
Elegant to the point.
Hey, listen, I mean, this comes up from time to time, and there are filings that occur with the State Department of Agriculture. We get, if there's foreign interest ownership, it's filed with the Department of Agriculture. It always sort of amazes me. Land is an amazing asset that people want, right? Whether you're in State College or whether you're somewhere around this globe, ownership of land is important. So short answer is yes, there is a concern, and we ought to keep that here for people who want to transition, right? In America, new Americans are welcome to own land, but let's make sure the ownership is in America.
Next, Barry. Yes, we need to ask you to ask the question in the microphone so that people on the Zoom can hear.
When your farm is in preserve, does that make any difference in the process, or is just a neutral variable?
If your farm is in reserve,
Right,
does it make any difference in the process?
right.
And the reserve is tied to the deed, correct? I mean, the land.
Yes,
Yeah, so of course, that is something you take into account, but I think this is part of being open in communication and having that out there so that the next owner coming in is aware of the
Oh.
information.
thank you.
I would just add, I mean, I think it makes a huge difference, right? Because the generation, it makes a huge difference, right? Because this generation's already, precast what the future generation is going to, do with it, right? And honor the deed, right? So you've got a pre-decision here that this generation has made. And I think that's a good thing, by the way. But for those who are planning, what do I do with a preserved farm? It carries a deed restriction. It says that this farm will remain a productive agricultural asset for perpetuity. That means forever. So an extra burden to sort of figure out, well, what does that look like? And to Darrell's point, I mean, that takes a lot more pre-planning, I think, right? Because you're predestined to make sure that it honors the deed. That's not just a handoff. Is that farm going to be successful to still honor the deed and the covenant that's been entered into? So a heavy responsibility, significant responsibility for the 6,000 farms that have done that. So it's a great question. Thank you. Other perspectives?
I do want to add too, I could see that though as being attractive, certainly to this next generation. I've noticed I have 3 kids that are under the age of 21. They're very into land preservation. So it could, it could also be a selling point as far as transfer.
I might add a little to that, if you don't mind. Our farm was preserved too, and we just transferred it. And it was nice because we knew it had to stay in farming, and we didn't have to deal with developers or anyone else. We were looking for farmers. Yeah.
Any other questions?
So, yeah, okay, good.
Thank you for your contributions. For those of you that are in the process or have gone through transitions, what's one thing you would do different if you had to do it all over again?
Yeah, go for it, Elder.
Obviously, it's been stated, start sooner. It's been mentioned several times, but you can never start soon enough. And hopefully there's no surprises when that day comes. I mean, unfortunately, my parents never told my siblings and I what was in their will when my dad died. So it was sort of kind of a surprise in a way, I guess, as to what was going, what the outcome wasn't quite what everybody had perceived it to be from just the years of how things had rolled out. And so obviously, like I said in the beginning, communication is a huge part of this. You need to talk and talk and talk, and it's not a comfortable subject to talk about, but the sooner you start talking about it and the clearer your lines of communication are with everybody that, it's okay, you're the son that stayed on the farm and your siblings have gone off and done their own thing, but how do you equal it out and everything? That all needs to be talked about before you open the will and find out what you didn't think you knew. So, so yeah.
I think the beauty is, as I mentioned, I think you can update your plans as if things do change. I will say this, though, it's the one plan you'll create that you'll never know how it turns out. So you gotta do the best you can, so.
Did I mention that Dan was witty too? You want to comment on this question?
At this point, we only did it a year and a half ago. At this point, I think we're very happy with what we've done. But yes, there may be a need for changes in the future. Many times in these transitions, there comes what they call the cliff. And if you know what I'm referring to, okay, you're going to sell the farm for so much for so many years. All right, that's great. Now that 15 years are up, now the cliff has come. Now what's going to happen? And you need to look way out at that as well, not just the immediate future.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not personally in this transition, but we have staff doing it. And what we hear over and over again is what Senator Vogel said is, boy, we should have started thinking about this much sooner and started preparing for the process. It takes a while, and there's so many just personal, just family decisions that have to be made to get there.
Yeah, great. Okay, we had a lot of questions that were submitted. I got those, Mary. We've got a lot of questions that were submitted, but some of them are pretty lengthy. And like the first one is legal discussion of avoiding and minimizing tax. I expect there's probably an entire undergraduate degree that could be put on that one. But so for that question, maybe I should say is where's the best, if you're looking for legal discussion of avoiding, minimizing tax, inheritance tax, what are some of the resources that we have available that we could point people to? Ann, you want to start with that one?
For tax
Yeah,
purposes,
for avoiding tax and minimizing inheritance tax.
There's an awful lot of resources available, especially with the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau has a good business services. Penn State has the Center for Agricultural and Shale Law. We're doing the mediation program, but the tax law has changed. So you want to make sure that you're using an attorney and tax person that's familiar with ag transition laws, and they're going to keep changing.
Yeah.
So you have to shop around and be good consumers of your money. So, you don't have to just take the first attorney or accountant that crosses your path. I just say interview a few and make sure that they understand your business. Pennsylvania farms are really complex. There's not one farm that I don't know how you gentlemen feel, but there's not one that I've met that's the same as the other one. So getting that team, and who spoke about the financial team?
Yeah.
That's going to be most important.
The 100 tools in the toolbox, and you got to find the most useful 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just add, I mean, there are a lot of different resources out there. If you're talking specifically about the inheritance tax, I mean, just a personal, we had an accountant, the accountant got us to the right attorney, right? Which was not the family attorney, which was not the family attorney who helped us with the farm preservation. It was a different attorney who specialized in that, particular issue. The attorney got us to an individual appraiser who could help us establish the value independently, right? So we weren't speculating a value because everybody in the family had a different sense of what the value was, but let's get a third-party valuation. So it became a web of, which brought us back to, okay, here's the value. This is what that tax obligation is going to be, both for the state, by the way, and for the federal government. So it took us a while. I mean, it was almost a whole sort of subset of time, right, before we ever got to the point of having a conversation about what are the tax, the tax obligation was predicated on an assumption at the front side of the planning process about who was actually going to purchase the property.
Yeah.
Which changed several times through the conversation based on the valuation.
Yeah.
Right. And then it became a conversation and partly response to the last question is that we made an assumption front side that the fairness among the family was going to be determined by the monetary value and the dollar payment to somebody. We completely missed the point that the intangible to family is sometimes more important than the financial tangible. That's an important point.
Yeah.
Right? Because in the purchase of our farm, Preserve Farm, the other family members wanted to know that they had a place to come back to, even though we were buying it. And there was a really important connection to the legacy of those who weren't buying it, but the legacy of who was there.
Yeah.
So my takeaway is don't always think of this in a dollar determination.
Yeah. Daryl, did you want to add something to that question? Inheritance tax?
No, I think that's good.
Okay, thanks.
We have a question here in the audience.
Sure.
Hi, Greg Robertson with the Pennsylvania Landscape and Nursery Association. And this whole transition is something that we've been talking about in our industry for the past several months. because we began to notice that nurseries were going out of business over the past decade or so. And we've had a decline in the number of nurseries in Pennsylvania by 25%. And our actual production numbers have gone down while the national production numbers are going up. So we're very concerned about it. And one of the downsides of preserved farmland that one of our members brought to my attention just last week was that now in Southeast Pennsylvania, preserved farmland is being looked at as a very valuable commodity by those who want to acquire a lot of land so that they have farmland surrounding their mega million-dollar home. And a farm just sold at $33,000 per acre, which is far out of reach of any of our nurseries to be able to buy that and put it into productive nursery use. So just a point there.
Yeah. So one of the issues for preserved farmland is working out a way to make sure they can keep farming, right? Isn't just held in trust for whatever other purpose. So another question we had, unless anybody else wants to comment on that, is there a map, checklist, flowchart, workbook to research how to decide the best course of action based on goals, circumstances, and individuals for younger farmers to plan for the retirement transition? So any advice for the younger ones that want to plan into the transition and not out of it? Resources, I think we're asking.
Yeah, there are resources. There are some great resources. The Farm Link organization, which was referenced earlier, is a great resource. I mean, it's got checklists and guidance documents. Penn State, Annie referenced earlier, there are great resources. There are the Ag Business Development Center has resources as well. There are a lot of different checklists. There's also the National Young Farmers organization, right? I always get the acronym wrong, but there's some young farmer organizations who are looking at that has some guidance documents for entering agriculture, generally not necessarily called transition, but entering ag. So again, I think there are, common question here of resources. There are some great resources, right? Just go to the Ag Business Development Center within the Department of Agriculture, which was an outgrowth of the Farm Bill, just as one stop. But again, it's a bit like the transition conversation. It'll take you different places, right? And should for the right resources.
Okay. Daryl, you want to comment on how people that are young farmers trying to get in can actually find financing to get in?
Yeah, I think that Farm Credit certainly has special programs established for young farmers to help out a little bit. I think there's a recognition that typically for young farmers getting into business, they may not have the same asset base or level of equity already. They don't have as much maybe business decision making. So there are programs, it's not just Farm Credit, but there's a program called Ag Biz Masters that Farm Credit works with a whole lot of other sponsors throughout the state to help them with some of the things like how to prepare a business plan to get into the business. So I think financing, it's not just Farm Credit. Certainly there are community banks and other banks that help as well. And I think everybody recognizes that young farmers getting into business have some additional needs that you wouldn't see for a more established operation. And I think everybody that's in ag financing, whether it's Farm Credit or otherwise, wants to help folks get into the business.
Thanks. Okay, another question was, there are reports of decreasing numbers of farms across the country, some without water sources. Where are we headed? And I think it's fair to say that it's part of a national trend that the number of farms is declining, and particularly in the West, water, even in places that weren't previously designated as climate change affected, were draining aquifers. So this is a national trend, really, that farms are getting larger and water resources across the country, maybe not so much Pennsylvania specifically, the water sources across the country are going to become more restricted. Is there anything else we want to add to that?
Yeah, and where we're headed east.
Yes, that's right. Fair enough. Agriculture.
Listen, we'll take 40 inches of natural rain anytime.
Yeah.
Right. When I look at the West and think long term.
Yeah.
Right. The land values, as Greg has pointed out, the technology is here, the markets are here, the people are here, right? The water's here.
Yeah.
And there are so many variables in this business already. Adding water to that, as we've witnessed real time, right? It is the most painful thing to watch for people who are generational, are now trying to figure out only because of water.
Yeah.
They can't continue.
Yeah. And
So
you can
I see it
on the-
heading east.
You can see it on the evening news every week now.
Yeah.
I think that also adds, not really for this discussion, but why a lot of the research and information extension puts out there about how do we teach farmers and urban farmers and people like that I deal with, how do we get water infiltration to happen, more readily as opposed to have it run off. So I think there's a lot we can still do to make sure we always have enough water here in Pennsylvania.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Yeah, Daryl.
Well, just speaking to the ag consolidation, I don't think it's a secret to anybody here. The farmer in the middle is sort of getting squeezed. So we see, I think the ag census reports would bear out that you see more large farms and you do see some niche farms, smaller ones coming in, but the person in the middle is one getting squeezed. So no doubt more competition to be successful in agriculture. And we would just suggest that anybody that wants to get into ag or be successful, that they not only focus on the production management skills, but the skill set on the financial and business management side as well. Those are critically important to be successful going forward.
Yeah. So Kent, there's a question about currently, this sounds like where you were a few years ago. Currently, I'm in the poultry and piggery industry and need more training so as to be effective and ultimately go commercial. What can I do? You have any advice from having come from that background?
Just find any seminar you can and make your way to it. Expand your knowledge as much as you can. The comment that was just made about the middle-sized farmer being squeezed has been true for 30 years here in Pennsylvania. The mid-sized guys, he's been squeezed for a long time. And I've maintained that either you get close to the consumer dollar or you get big. And if you try and do anything in between that, you're only fooling yourself. You'll not be able to succeed. You've got to get close to as close to the consumer dollar as you possibly can. You have to be a price maker, not a price taker. And if you're raising hogs and you're on contract with somebody, you're a price taker. You're not a price maker. When our poultry business, while it was really small, I mean, I sold 2,000, 2,500 turkeys a year. I never lost money raising turkeys. Never lost a dime. We were always in the black. Now, sometimes it might have only been $2 or $3 a bird, but we were price makers. We got a premium for our turkey. People knew it. People appreciated the quality of the bird. And we had customers 50, 55, 60 years consistently. So
that's pretty great advice, Kent. Thank you. So could you please, this is another one of those questions where we need to point people to resources, I think. Could you please help us understanding the entrepreneurial strategies of accumulating capital for agricultural-based projects? I think we're just looking to not give them an answer in one day, but where can they look for advice about how to do that?
I think the big thing that I would say in our industry, we heard about consolidation. I don't think there's an ag industry that isn't going through some kind of consolidation. Landscape industry, big time. The big players are going to ultimately eat up the small players or the medium-sized players. Maybe the small ones will always exist. But I think you need to be aware of what's happening in the marketplace. Being aware is critically important if you're going to succeed. And that's why these transition plans might need to be changed over time, because things change in the marketplace and you might have to adjust for them. Because again, I started on my plan more than a decade ago and things are changing constantly. So from an entrepreneurship standpoint, you got to be an entrepreneur and know how to pivot your business if it's important, if consolidation's coming down your path or something's going on. You got to be able to look way out there, be a visionary and know what's going on in your industry to have an opportunity to try to impact it. And that's why I brought up earlier about when I see these nurseries going out of business, I'm very concerned about what happens if I don't have plants to plant. Now, there are lots of producers out there, but remember I said I do high-end residential. My people don't want something in a little pot. My people want a freaking 30-inch ball and 15 feet high. And the average grower doesn't grow those anymore. And so that's what's really important to see what's coming, what's changing, and how are we going to impact that.
There we go. That's plain speaking. What can legislators on the state and federal level do to assist farms that are transitioning to new business models? Thanks, Elder.
I think we discussed this earlier. We've done several things through the farm bill we passed in 2019 as far as being able to give farmers the other things to use, capital and different things through the ag department, as well as the beginning farmer tax credit, which I discussed earlier as well. Those are some things we've done. We're obviously always looking for ideas and ways to help any way we can. We have ideas all the time that don't always make it into legislation, but obviously anything we can do, if somebody has an issue they think needs to be discussed or something we can do, we're willing to look at it and see if we can help.
Yeah, I would add a couple of things. One is, to the point that was made earlier about land and land access and value of land. At the end of the day, having land that actually can transfer to agriculture is an important public principle, right? So having a farmland preservation program where we've spent 25 years and lead the nation in farmland preservation, I am just so grateful, that the legislatures and the governors have passed, saw this vision, right, as Dan speaks of. So the legacy, I think there's a really great conversation about the legacy of Pennsylvania having these farms that are available to actually farm, right? So it starts with the resource being available for people who actually see a future in the business. Two, I've come to appreciate that part of our roles collectively, and this came out with Senator Vogel's work in the new and beginning farmer tax credit, is that we need to set up a structure that is there and it's predictable, right? But we also have a public responsibility to socialize the conversation about transitions. Right? You got to socialize this a bit. This is today as part of this conversation of socializing. It's okay to talk about this, right? And we want to help facilitate that. So there's that piece of just sort of being interested in and encouragement, because it's not just enough to have the land and resources, and extension and programs, right? You actually need to do it. And then third is making sure that the resources are there. I think the Ag Law Center is a great resource that's underutilized, quite frankly, to help do this. There is a mitigation service that can help mitigate these difficult family conversations. That service is there. There are technical people who can help do it. So there's a whole resource layer inside of that, but I wouldn't put the resource layer first, right? It's setting the conversation up about the resource being available, natural resource, and then building tools, and then getting to that point where the resource is there.
So I should say that in a relatively short period of the 7 years or so I've lived and worked in Pennsylvania, I've been really impressed at how many state legislators are really concerned about this issue, not just in rural areas, but in urban areas. Senator Vogel's an example, representative on this panel, but I'm really impressed that across both parties and both houses, there's a lot of interest and a lot of support. So when he says bring ideas to them, I think it's a pretty sincere offer. They'll do it. They'll do something with it.
And just to sort of kind of hit on that point, Secretary Redding, I wasn't able to attend, but he did an urban farm tour a couple of weeks ago where he actually was in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia discussing with leaders in those towns around the cities, how do we set up these urban gardens that people can grow their own vegetables and not have to depend on somebody else to grow their vegetables. You have open land, vacant lots here and there around town, and they use these lots and do urban gardening and that. I worked with Senator Shirley Kitchen in Philadelphia right after I got elected. And I went to Philadelphia a couple of times with her, and we were able to give them some ideas and work on that. That was 12 years ago now, I guess. But anyhow, it is doable, but it is another option that, you don't have to have 1,000 acres to be a farmer. I mean, people can make as much money off of several acres as they can 100 acres if you do it right and you're connected to the consumers and things along those lines. A couple acres of vegetables can make you a decent living if you want to go that route. Yes.
Yeah.
I appreciate you, Senator, mentioning the urban ag. All of us have this vision of what a farm is, right? And I'm challenged every day as secretary to redefine what the farm is and what agriculture is, right? The principles that we apply to the open spaces of traditional agriculture are found deep in the city centers, right? It's the agronomic decisions, there are market decisions, there are HR decisions, there are transition decisions, there are, invasive species decisions, right? There are water decisions, on and on and on. And I've really come to appreciate that what we've done, and to the senator's point, is we talk to a lot of different states, and what we have here, we all think is normal, right? We all think we're normal. Most of us. right? But the point is, these are extraordinary. I mean, we are so welcoming as an industry to people, whether you're first generation or 10th generation, whether you're the Amish or the English, right? Whether you're in the forest products industry or you're in the, the horticultural industry. I think that is an amazing place to be. So for all of the structural stuff you've got to sort of navigate to get to the point of being in agriculture, we see it every day. Hilltop Farm in Pittsburgh, those producers that I visited, you could drop them into any single county in Pennsylvania, and they look like they've been there for generations, right? Because they're using extension, they've got a decision. I can take it to the other end of the state into Philadelphia. 25 languages spoken in about 10 block area. 25 languages, Asian languages, and agriculture being the universal language. Every single one of them, right, brought with them some piece of their homeland. It just happens to be on a different scale than we are, right? I think it's an amazing story, and why we're talking about how do you keep that going? That's transitions, right? So thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a quick
Dennis.
question. We've kind of talked about generational transition and we've talked about business model transition. Do people ever combine those and transition to business model as they transition between generations? I'd just be curious if anybody's seen that happen before.
Yeah, I can't tell you statistically what percentage it is, but we see that, I'd say fairly often, that the model, it was a sole proprietorship and it goes to, some type of S corp or some other legal structure.
Yeah, so there are, I think, for those who couldn't hear the question, transition between business models and entirely different commodities and so forth. And I think we've heard that, yeah, that's happening.
Yeah, no, I can't, name names or anything like it, but I'm thinking of a family situation right now where, they have a lot of children. The children want to be in agriculture. There's not enough opportunity within the structure, what they have to do that. So they're very entrepreneurial, looking at their different options of things that they can do and making that happen. It's pretty inspiring when you see it.
I think that's the reason to start early. I think what I see happening is sometimes when people get into this transition of ownership, they begin to realize if we're going to be able to make this thing have the cash flow we need or whatever, we can't keep doing what we're doing. So it might happen really under the watch of the older generation who hasn't transitioned yet. But what's causing that change to happen is they know for them to transition out a decade down the road, they better make changes today.
We have a question from 4-H. I'm really delighted we have representatives today of the 93,000 4-H youth across the state. So please ask your question.
Hi, so I'm from the city of Pittsburgh, and I'm very glad that you brought up farming within the city and transitioning some of that space in the farmland. In Pittsburgh, one of the problems that we're trying to address is we have hundreds of abandoned lots that aren't used for anything that would be great green spaces and great farming spaces. Do you know of any resources or any programs that are working to address this problem?
I feel like my refrain is yes, right? But, it's interesting, Pittsburgh, and again, you get to see a lot of things across the state, but I give sort of the Pittsburgh team, they've got, a lot of different infrastructure components there. And I say that in contrast to other parts of the state, but, there's a Pittsburgh Land Trust. Doug, I think I have that right. Yeah, Allegheny Land Trust, which is doing exactly that because they want to both preserve it and then convert it and then have it be a productive asset, not just an open lot, right? An undeveloped open lot. So there's a lot of good things happening in Pittsburgh, but to your point, there are subsets of issues inside of that in terms of then how do you convert that property that's been open? One, determine the ownership. Two, preserve it. And then three, have it be productive. Right? And there's a lot of things you've got to do, but it's a great question. Thank you.
From the standpoint of the college, we've had some work in Pittsburgh where we did work on soils, and there's discussion about trying to figure out how we can do across all those lots, how you can do soil testing to sort of figure out what's needed and what's not needed for the soils for each of those things. I think we're wrestling with how to come up with a way to do that efficiently. We have a soil testing lab here, but it's something that we're churning about. It's just how to look at those sites efficiently to try to give advice on any sort of soil amelioration that might be needed. So we saw that's been sort of identified as a key overriding problem. We might be able to come up with an efficient solution for us. We're working on that one. See, any other questions for the audience at the moment? We're getting close to the end. One of the questions, there we go. One of the questions was about reliable wireless internet. How do you expect the development of reliable wireless internet to rural areas to benefit future generations of ag business? Suggestions on potential preparations to take advantage of the benefits. I think it's pretty obvious from what's been done with wireless is you got to be online in order to really connect with the market. Are there any things you can say to embellish that answer a bit?
We're working on it.
And we're really proud in the college that a couple of our extension staff developed an app that allowed providers to bid in the state, and they managed to trap $368 million in federal funds to try to build rural internet across the state. That's an accomplishment, the extension of which we're extremely proud. So I want to give that a plug.
It's a huge issue and a lot of moving parts, obviously, because different municipalities and different areas of the state have better broadband than other parts of the state do. And obviously you go to Greene County, you pretty much have nothing. But I live in Beaver County and I don't have real good internet access in my place. We have to use a satellite and a Wi-Fi unit to get satellite in my place because the cable company won't run cable past my house because there's 4 houses and a mile and a half of road. So the economics aren't there for them to run the cable past my house. So it's just issues like that where we have so many rural houses on roads that it's not economical. So we really need to find a way. Hopefully some of this federal money is coming along and CARES Act money, whatever all it's called, to use the new infrastructure bill that the federal government's working on to do this, because it really is an important issue. It becomes more and more important to everyone, but also to the farming community, especially because the farming community is in more rural areas and everything is connected to the internet anymore, whether you want to have robotic milkers for your cows or whether the augmented reality we watched this morning here, our thing is all tied into Wi-Fi and broadband and things like that. So it is something that needs to happen and happen quickly, or we're going to be left farther behind than we are right now. We just proved that with the school year last year, how many students couldn't get on, didn't have Wi-Fi or broadband in their areas, and their parents were taking them to McDonald's so they could download their classes or whatever from McDonald's Wi-Fi. I mean, it's a common problem and across the state, not only in rural areas, but in the inner city areas and things as well. It just isn't there. It really needs to something we need to address. We're working at it, but it needs to be addressed sooner rather than later. Yes.
I could just add, I mean, because it's both Senator Vogel's point and Kent Strock's point, is that the internet brings you closer to that consumer. Right. And it's going to be the differentiator as to whether you're in the business, not in the business, the enterprise works, doesn't work. Right. So it's got all kinds of social pieces, but there's an amazing and incredibly important business aspect to that. So
I was struck this morning with a presentation comment on how California led in consumer focus. And a big thing in California, and I'm surprised it seems to be less so in Pennsylvania, is community supported agriculture, where people contract with someone to deliver a box of vegetables to their place week in, week out. And it's extremely popular and very widely distributed in California. And I wonder if Pennsylvania did more of that, they would rise from fourth to first. But it can also be driven by having good internet connections so you can stay in touch with your customers.
I think we're really excited about this opportunity because you're all here because maybe you saw something online, and I'm here because someone sent me an email. I have farmers that we can't reach. So I think our dairy team did something really cool where they set up a phone line for people to call in and get information. So we remember that there are farmers out there that we are not reaching. And with bringing in this broadband, I think it just opens up the doors to being able to get your bank statements online or find out about grants that everybody knows. So it's going to be a real equalizer in getting information to people.
So we're running short a bit on time. I might run in. One of the next questions I'll just try to knock off quickly. What is the college doing to promote the transitioning to and development of sustainable and restorative agriculture in contrast to the industrial approach that has dominated conventional agriculture since the 1970s. And I'd say the answer to that is the college is doing that all the time. You're sitting in a farm of about 2,500 acres where nearly every acre is devoted in one way or another to projects of that kind. And across the college, we have faculty working in those areas. Kind of the core of it for me has always been things like no-till and cover cropping, which Pennsylvania is a national leader, but still has more to go, especially in the cover cropping area. But it's something we're working on all the time. One of the questions, and this is really made for Dan, what can we do? How can we develop more entrepreneurs in the green industry?
Well, I think our goal is going to be programs like this, or really what Extension is doing is how do we help young people think they could have a seat at the table and try to get into this industry, and then have good mentors to help them along the way. You know, we've heard it said that, you know, financial knowledge is really important. And I think, again, people learn about the production side of it, but don't learn about the financial side and the metrics of having a successful business. My success was I had some great mentors beyond my family that helped really move me forward. I hope today I'm giving a little bit of that back. And I hope to you young people, you all walk out here today and say, what did I learn? And what don't I know? And how do I get others to help my young group learn about this stuff? Because you're our future. You know, I'm going to be long gone, but you're our future. And so I was really glad to see so many of you here today and hope you'll do something about it. But there's a lot we can help each other, again, through mentorship, job training, workforce development. But we got to show young people how they can get that farm and get into business. You know, that's really critical. Because there's, as you saw in my case and in others, there's not always family members that want to be in the industry. And we need to provide the opportunity for them to leave and to welcome new people in, because just as my children wanted out, somebody else's children want in, but they don't know how to do it. So we need to help them do that. And that's where a lot of these resources are really important.
So if any of you young people want to become entrepreneurs in the green industry, he's hiring. I'm not, I'm a kidding, he's hiring. Let's see, the final question that was submitted, sounds like you're going to want to wind up on. Oh, I should say that I want to encourage people at 3 o'clock. People have asked about what their representatives can do about this. We have you're a congressional representative very much interested in this. Glenn Thompson will be speaking in the college area in the theater over there, and so he'll be having a town hall. So if you want to transition from this meeting to another, it takes you to the federal level. That'd be the place to go at 3 o'clock. So with that, I want to ask the question that I've held for the last. What are the biggest challenges facing the next generation with the changes that are currently taking place in industry?
Regulation.
I will say,
Sorry? Regulation's been nominated.
well, I think more globally than that, though, is I can see from my first 10 years in the industry to my last 10 years, change is happening at a much greater pace. And thank goodness you young people can adjust to it. This is about as far as I go. I'd have a flip phone if I thought I could get away with it. But I think you have to really be aware of what's coming down the pipe and what's happening. And I don't want change to sound bad. Change is a really good thing. Change creates a lot of opportunity. Change is why we're one of the wealthiest countries in the world, is because we can keep adapting and do more with less. But climate change is another good example of, you know, we can't control all the change that's going to happen to us. So I think change is probably the biggest item that you can count on that's going to have an impact going forward. And again, that's why on our topic of transitioning a business, the plan you make today may not be the plan you leave this earth with, because changes will need to occur as these changes occur, either how companies are rolling up or changing, or markets, or many other things. You know, there are people in California that thought they were going to do something with their land. Now it's all burned up. That grape vineyard isn't what it used to be. So again, I think you're going to see a lot of change. So be prepared for it. Change is not always bad, though.
Actually, they don't even get burned up. All you have to do is smoke across the vineyard, and they lose the crop for the year.
Oh, okay.
Smoke taint.
I just want to agree with Dan on change for you young people. Don't be afraid, embrace it and take it on and learn it and do it. 6 months after we transitioned to farm, our sons put in a robotic milker. So talk about change. It had to happen. Yeah, my wife and I weren't gonna milk twice a day anymore. It had to happen. It did happen.
We need
So-
more, we need more like you.
Embrace it. Yeah, don't run away from it.
Yeah, others.
I would just add, I mean, I think, there's a lot of issues to sort of sort through, but the one thing, and for me, it's just sort of keeping the public tracking with us. Right, I feel like we'll figure out the rest of it, but if I know the public is sort of there and they're supportive of what I'm doing and what we're doing, and, these issues of interface, and being recognized for all of the additional value we add to the community and the state, right? Climate, the environment, the jobs, the economics, the food, having the people track with us, then we'll figure out the policy pieces and program pieces. But I think that's a big challenge.
Can I close with one more? For those of you that know me, I'm on the mantra of workforce development all the time. So that is another big challenge. And it is a change, and it is hard to show people that there are huge opportunities in this industry. You got to be maybe a little bit bigger risk taker, but there's no better reward than to have your hands in the soil in my book. It's kind of like connected to that God piece that we talked about, because there's not more land being created. If anything, we're losing land because the oceans are rising. So I do think workforce continues to be a challenge that we all have to work together to face. And that's where robotic milkers come in. In my case, it's autonomous lawnmowers. Technology is going to replace some of the workforce because they're just not available.
And I just want to encourage the young producers and potential producers out there, because, world population is growing. Developing countries are becoming more economically viable. That means a higher demand for food content. So food demand is there. Pennsylvania has great access to markets and transportation networks. We have water, we have good labor. We have a lot of advantages here. So why not have that production that the world's demanding right here at home? There's a lot of opportunity.
If I could add, I mean, this seems like the appropriate moment and group to talk about the farm vitality grants, right? I don't want you to leave without, Jim talked about this, and just it came out of the Pennsylvania Farm Bill, supported by the governor and the legislature. It's the seed to this growing conversation about transitions, right? It's business transitions, there's succession planning. Think about planning, and it can be done through the farm vitality grant, $7,500 up to 75% of the costs. Very simple grant process. Doug Wolfgang here is our director of the Farm and Preservation Program, Ashley and team. So if you need it, you're thinking about it, start now. The money in the program is there. We've done 177 of these, I think is the number so far. So, and proof that it works. So yeah, thanks, Jim.
Kent and Elder, any last words?
No, I would just say what I said in the beginning. Obviously, start sooner rather than later, and don't be afraid to change. Obviously, it's nothing stays the same. And if you can't milk cows all your life, there's no shame in the fact that you can't milk cows your whole life. If you have to transition to something else, the sun will still come up tomorrow morning, and the world continues to turn, and the world will be better for it. So just do what you have to do, and don't be afraid of it. And thank you very much. Glad to be here today.
So to our audience, thank you for joining us. You can receive a recording of the session. Just make sure you let Mary have your email address if you didn't sign up beforehand. And I want you to join me in thanking all of our speakers today. I think you agree with me. They provided a wealth of information.